All right, here we go, everyone. This is the 14th episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy. And for my very special guest, I have here today with me, Jake Bishop from the channel. Jake Bishop, he's original like me, using his name for the channel. So
yeah, we are on the team that was just like, we're going to start a channel, and we didn't go that step two. Hey, we need to come up with a name for this channel. We
clever
were just
name.
like, let's just make a video. And then we'd already made a couple, and we were like, well, yeah, everyone has these nice names.
Yeah, like bookish this and shelf that, and all
Counselor
these.
of the Moon Spawn. Like,
Yeah,
it's my
I mean,
favorite.
wow, that's one of my favorites, actually. Counselor Moonspawn. And that is
Yeah.
like the coolest name for a channel. But it is so lovely to have you here, Jake. Thank you so much for agreeing to chat with me for whatever this goes.
Who knows? Yeah, long time listener, first time caller. Happy to be on. It's one of the great shows of our time. So I think I'm going to put this on my resume. Was on Dear Dr. Fantasy 14, and I think it's going to open a lot of doors for me.
I have no doubt of that. I mean,
Yeah.
the doors are just going to open by themselves now, probably.
Yeah, I'll be like, my cat will be jealous. I won't even need to use doorknobs anymore. They'll just fly open.
Yeah,
literally and figuratively.
Well, it is lovely to have you here, and I have been watching some of your stuff too, and I've seen you in discussions, and this was something I was very much looking forward to, having a chance to talk with you. And I hope that we'll also have loads of chances to talk about books, because we do have some series in common that we love.
Oh, we have quite a few.
Quite a few, actually. I know that you are a big-time Robin Hobb fan, and that is awesome. She is in my top 3 of all time, and I haven't even finished Realm of the Elder Rings yet.
Be hard for her to climb, though, because Tolkien and Erickson are one.
It's Tolkien and Malazan in the way.
Yeah,
so,
those are tough mountains to climb.
I think so, but like a couple of years ago, I never would have thought anyone could have surpassed Tolkien for me. But so you never know, and just I was stuck in my ways since I was like 12 years old. Tolkien was my favorite, and then when I'm almost 50, I suddenly, wow, okay. So you never know what's gonna happen.
Tolkien is a worthy favorite.
I think so. I
reread Lord of the Rings this year.
Oh, cool.
And I have a video called I Read Lord of the Rings Wrong, which is probably my favorite title, even though it's a little clickbaity and obviously somewhat facetious. Yeah. But because the first time I read it, I was not reading it as the book it was trying to be. And I randomly realized this at 3 a.m. one night and posted in Discord, I think I read the Lord of the Rings wrong. And people were like, isn't it 3 a.m. for you right now? And I was just like, don't judge me.
Interesting. So, I mean, do you mind recapping that a little bit? So
Yeah,
what was wrong? Sure. What were you doing wrong when you were reading Lord of the Rings?
So, I mean, there was probably a couple things, but the main thing that I believe I was doing wrong is I was reading Lord of the Rings like it was. So for context, the 2 series I read before was The Wheel of Time and The Witcher, which are both very much, I think, the author putting their view of how humanity is typically on display.
Okay.
And I think Lord of the Rings is not that. It's how humanity can be at our best in even in the worst of times. Yeah. And I was reading it as being like, this is how, I was reading it like it was The Wheel of Time. I was reading it and I was like, I can't believe I had this take. But I had the screenshot up in the video. I exposed myself, but if that sentence sounded wrong, I called myself out. I was like, it's like the hobbits, just like, what did Frodo do to earn their endear loyalty? It's like, that's not the point, Jake. Okay, it's not the point. So yes, I read it wrong and loved it this time on reread.
Yeah,
I liked it the first time. It's not like I disliked it, but I was just kind of like, yeah, I enjoyed that. And then the second time I was like, this rules.
Yeah, there's a lot of the ideal in Tolkien and in Middle Earth. If you look at Lothlorien is the ideal forest, right? I mean, it's just, you can't have a more ideal and maybe even in a platonic sense, like that's the essence of forests right there. So, and then there are certain figures who are like Aragorn, who are, they're not three-dimensional characters. Aragorn is actually a pretty flat character, and often flat characters do serve an important function. I'm not saying bad. Flat is not bad. A lot of people hear flat and they think bad. Actually, there's some brilliant flat characters throughout literature and in fantasy. And Aragorn is one of them, in my opinion. And most of the characters are fairly flat. It's the hobbits that are a little more three-dimensional, that feel like people to me.
I appreciated Frodo so much more on reread.
Yeah.
Especially that was actually, what character I jumped out, the two characters that I was on read, I was like, I love these people, was Frodo and Gimli.
Oh yes, Gimli's great too. Yeah. Though he's also kind of a
he's static, right? Like he's actually arguably, he has he has some development like on his relationship with the elves.
Yes, with Legolas in particular.
Comes out. Legolas, I think, is probably the least interesting of the Fellowship.
Interesting. Or he's certainly static. I mean, he's an elf. He's been around for what, thousands?
That's just because I really like everyone else.
Yeah.
Whatever. Anyway.
But I love Legolas. I love everybody. But you do have a tendency in Lord of the Rings to have, good and evil. And I know there's nuance, like Gollum. There is, I think, a realistic chance of him being redeemable, for example, or you look at everybody's tempted by the ring. So everybody has the potential to be evil too. But for the most part, you have clear delineations there. Orcs are pretty much irredeemable baddies, and we don't cry when they die. We don't look at, the dying orc who is, lamenting and or anything like that. They're just, kind of there to be wiped out, so whereas I mean, it's that classical fantasy thing, and it's what I cut my teeth on for sure. So I think I always read it the way you were describing when you said, okay, this is how I'm gonna read it now.
Actually, it was a Tolkien essay that made me realize it. It was the one where he talked about like his series after, where he was like, he basically described A Song of Ice and Fire, and he was like, it wasn't worth telling.
Have you read it? Have you read his attempt at the sequel?
I haven't read that, no.
It's, in my opinion, I'm so glad he did not write it. The magic and the beauty is gone from Middle Earth, essentially. And it's really dark and grim. Tolkien almost became the originator of grimdark as well.
That would have been hilarious if he was like made like classic fantasy like this huge thing, and then he's like, now I'm going to be the one who subverts myself. I'm not going to wait for someone else to do it.
That's Tolkien wearing shades. I mean,
it's like the evil Tolkien.
No, it's really heavy. It's not. I'm just glad actually he didn't write it personally, because like I said, one of the things that I find so compelling, because I used to read Lord of the Rings every year, and I've read the Silmarillion a million times, and the Hobbit. I don't even know how many times I've read them, but what I find so wonderful about that series is the beauty of it. I find it so elevating and so moving. And that's really what got me into fantasy in the first place, was like, okay, I need more of this. I have, this is beautiful. And it helps me also to appreciate the life around me. I feel a keener sense of the world's beauty as well after reading about Lothlorien, it's an idealized forest, but it influences my perceptions of the world around me in a very positive way. So I love that. And I mean, Tolkien's just for me, I will always have Tolkien in deep inside me. It's just it's who I am. A lot of it is because of reading Lord of the Rings when I was like 12 or 13 years old. So, but
I love the Lothlorien chapter. One of my favorite things about Lord of the Rings is, despite how like somewhat idealized some aspects are, the actual like world itself still is full of like many like cruelties, and everyone is expecting to lose like the entire time.
Yeah.
Like Gandalf really, he looks at the situation and he's like, he looks at all the potential paths to victory and they all end in disaster except for this one long shot.
Yeah.
And so he's just like, well, you know, if this long shot that's probably going to fail is the only thing that might not fail, I guess we're gonna go for that. And everyone the entire time is like, well, we're probably gonna fail, but let's try anyways. And then they kind of get, actually the only thing that stops them, I think my favorite scene in Lord of the Rings, which I'm going to spoil Lord of the Rings people.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah.
If you haven't read it or watched Lord of the Rings, I'm going to get you to pause this and I'm going to get you to go read, then watch Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And then come back. It's
in that order, read and then watch.
Yeah. If possible, always read, then watch.
Yeah.
It's my policy. And it's in Mount Doom, my favorite chapter, when Sam spares Smeagol. Sam has now worn the ring and he kind of gets it now.
Yep.
And for the first time, like it wasn't like he couldn't kill Smeagol. He could have just, Smeagol's gone. And the Sam from a week ago would have killed Smeagol like without hesitation. Like would have been like, finally. But he spares Smeagol, and that random act of mercy that seems completely like from a practical perspective, it seems like a ridiculous thing to do. Like, hey, we're gonna go try destroy the ring. Should we keep around the person who wants to steal it and take it when we're 20 feet away from destroying it? But that's actually the reason he succeeds, because if he had killed Smeagol, Frodo would have just
become the next Gollum. Yeah, absolutely. It's also a callback to The Hobbit, where Bilbo makes a similar decision to spare Gollum, and when he's met him deep beneath the mountain, and he's in the belly of the whale there, and it's Gandalf who points out later on that because Bilbo began his ownership of the ring with an act of mercy, he doesn't kill Gollum. He jumps over him instead and escapes. He could have killed him with Sting, and it would have been the end of Gollum, and that's that. But Gandalf points out later to Frodo, because Bilbo began his ownership of the ring with an act of mercy, it did not corrupt him to the extent that it might have. And he also, there's a moment, a very famous line where Frodo says to Gandalf, it's a pity that Bilbo didn't kill him when he had the chance, right? And then Gandalf says, pity, it is pity that stayed his hand, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's just a brilliant bunch of lines, but it's the point here is that mercy is something, and this is for Tolkien as a devout Roman Catholic too. I think it's important to point out that Tolkien was not writing allegory. He wasn't trying to make his, like C.S. Lewis's Narnia tales, where the lion is, Aslan is Christ and all that. Tolkien didn't write anything like that, but his faith is an important thing for him in this as well. And I think the message of mercy is very much at the heart of Lord of the Rings. And so, yes, as you pointed out, it's because of these acts of mercy that Gollum is around to, in a way, save the day at the end. So, yeah, and it's a little bit of it's not divine intervention necessarily, but it's divine foreknowledge, I suppose, or something of that nature, and that things have a way of working out. And in the nick of time too, because as you were pointing out too, Tolkien's very much influenced by Old English poetry and Old Norse material, where courage in the face of certain doom. There's basically you're going to lose, but you trudge on and you do what you have to do to try to get where you need to be, and then suddenly it happens through some act of seemingly random, but really not, because there's something divine at work here, something that happens, and as a result, in this case, of mercy, so that saves the day. So that's definitely at the heart of Lord of the Rings.
All right. Yes, this is a good way to start your Dr. Fantasy, with how good Lord of the Rings is.
Yeah,
Excellent
I mean,
start.
I didn't know we were going here, but yeah. I'm happy to go here.
Wasn't where I was expecting to go either, but it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
But you pointed out that I have a new favorite, and that is the Malazan series. And you've read, now straighten me out here. You've read Malazan Book of the Fallen, I know. Have you read the Esselmont material yet?
The only non of the main 10 I've read is The God Is Not Willing.
Okay.
At some point, I am going to reread the main 10, and while I do that, I'm going to do like the everything read, probably across like an entire 2 years or something.
Yep.
So
That's exactly what I did. I read Malazan Book of the Fallen first and realized, okay, I need to read all this other stuff because this is awesome, but I also want to read the other stuff because it's going to even help me appreciate it more, and it really has. And I love Esselmont too.
Yeah, I also just want to read the other stuff like for its own sake as well, right?
Oh yeah. I mean,
I'm excited for Carcanas.
Carcanas is okay. So it's different in tone in some ways, and I think it's toward the end of Malazan Book of the Fallen. There are some very, for me, they're wonderful moments, but some, I think, people who just want faster pace and want action and that sort of thing probably find themselves a little disengaged at times from the more, what some people call philosophy in the particularly in the later books, but that there's a lot more of that sort of thing in Carcanas. So yeah, and it's brilliant. I think Carcanas is, I still have not asked Stephen Erickson this question. I should ask him this. He might not even answer it. Maybe it's a stupid question, but I've always felt like Carcanas is what he really, really wants to write. Like this is his, it's kind of quintessential Ericksonian writing. And it's absolutely brilliant. But I also feel like it's a place where he would want us as Malazan readers to go, and not, it seemed like the reception, I mean, everyone knows the reception to Carcanas wasn't what perhaps it could have been. I mean, it wasn't as good as the reception to Malazan Book of the Fallen, let's say. And maybe it's because of this perception that it just got more philosophical and that sort of thing. But I think it's just absolutely beautiful stuff. And as you know, he and Esselmont are now my favorite fantasy writers, and they're Canadian too. So what is it about these Canadians? You've got
Eric Guy Gavriel K as well.
You've got GGK. You've got lots of great writers outside of fantasy too, like Alice Munro and all kinds of great writers up there. What is it? Is there something in the water up there, or is there? Is it because it's so cold and you have nothing else to do but like write long books? Or
I think it's just, we're just generally brilliant,
Yeah. Okay.
I'd like to thank you for the word there. I sometimes call things Erickson-esque, but you use
Ericksonian, yeah,
which just feels so much more sophisticated. So I will be stealing that from you and using that from now on.
You are absolutely free to steal it. I'm sure I'm not the originator of that one, but it's the one that just makes sense to my brain anyway. So
as soon as you said it, it clicked, and I was like, "Oh, that's good," but it never occurred to me until
I would say Esselmont-esque, though, perhaps.
Yeah, for most authors, I would say like Tolkien.
Esselmontonian.
No, it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. Ericksonian, though, definitely.
Ericksonian works really well. That's a good word.
Yeah, it's a good word. It's a handy word. I've probably used it a lot.
You might actually be the world leader in that word. In
the word Ericksonian. I might be. Except, you know what? There's the psychologist Erik Erikson or whatever. And probably people are in the psychology realm are saying Ericksonian all the time too. So
that's lame. That's our name. Fantasy owns that name. Come on.
Come on, that's fantasy. So I certainly think when someone says the name Erickson, I think obviously fantasy, right?
Yeah, I didn't know anyone else named Erickson existed.
Yeah.
It's funny. Read by Kyle. I don't know if are familiar with the booktuber Kyle. Read by Kyle. His last name is Erickson. So if he watches this, he's going to be like, "You didn't know someone named Erickson existed, Jake." I didn't forget about your existence, Kyle. I did for 5 seconds, but
he's got a very distinguished name there. So yeah,
it's funny. He's from like the same town that Guy Gavriel K grew up in, and his last name is Erickson. So
wait, because you're saying Kyle is from that town?
Yeah. Kyle grew up in the same town that Guy Gavriel Kay grew up in.
Because
Yeah,
Steven
Erickson did as well. Yeah,
is from the same town. Is Kyle
yeah.
related to Steven Erickson?
I don't think so.
Oh, wow, that's weird. Because yeah, they all
Well, I
grew
mean,
up
Erickson's
in
name isn't
Winnipeg.
actually Erickson,
Winnipeg,
right?
right?
Yeah, but Erickson's name is London, right? Like
His real last name is London, but Erickson is his mother's last name.
oh, okay.
Yeah, so he is he has Erickson, relations somewhere or other from Sweden, actually. So yeah, I mean, even though it's not his real last name, it is actually, he has a good claim to that name as well.
I didn't know that was a thing. I thought he might have just been like, I think Erickson sounds better than London on a book title,
Yeah, no, I think that was a thoughtful decision on his part to take that pen name. But yeah, it's his mother's last name, I believe. So yeah, he might be related to Kyle. I mean, all the Ericksons from Winnipeg related? I don't know, maybe. So,
who does?
But I mean, yes, as you pointed out, so Steven Erickson and Guy Gavriel Kay went to the same high school. And I believe it's the case that Erickson's older brother was in the same class with GGK, and that GGK's younger brother was in the same class with Steven Erickson. Something like that, I think.
Considering that's probably a pretty small town, that town has got to lead the world all time in brilliant sentences per capita.
I believe that is the case. Yeah. And there has to be something in the water there.
Yeah, there's got to be something in the water where people just start writing good sentences,
Yeah, like brilliant prose.
They're not just both really good, they're really good in somewhat similar ways as well.
Yeah, no, I think that I've only read Tigana, so I'm a little bit derelict in my duties there, and I will read more GGK because I have a ton of respect for his prose. But you're right. I think that both he and Steven Erickson have this really, they're very versatile. They're very capable of levels of prose. So, I'm more familiar with Erickson's writing, of course, because I've read I've read everything he's written Malazan wise, and he has other books too. But yeah, I think it's fair to say I'm familiar enough with his prose at this point.
I would hope so.
Yeah. So, but yeah, he is so. It's not just that he writes beautifully, which he can do, but he has so many different modes of writing where he can write comic stuff, or he can write epic and tragic, and he can write, just there are different levels, and of course, different voices for dialogue and all that. So the versatility, the range is something that never fails to impress me. And there are a lot of great writers who just, they have more of a single voice, that I enjoy. But it astounds me when I come across writers who have that kind of range. It's truly amazing.
Yeah, his range is pretty ridiculous. It's not quite. It would be among my I have a top series video and it's in it. But I have to say, it's hard to argue how impressive it is. Even if there are some choices where I'm just kind of I could have done without that for my enjoyment, but it's insanely impressive. If you were to pick a series that would have been the hardest for someone else to finish.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there'd be an obvious candidate for Malazan, Esselmont would do it, right?
Yeah, I suppose.
If someone was doing it, they wouldn't bring in someone. Maybe they'd bring in you after who knows?
Oh God, no. To be just very frank, Steven Erickson can do things in writing that I could never do.
It's going to be true for whoever they bring in, though.
Yeah. And I'm not just, that's just a fact. He's got all kinds of tools in his kit there that not many people would be able to replicate.
Yeah, whoever, if someone had to finish an Erickson series, it would be a daunting task.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would take the job other than, I don't know if anyone would take the job. Everyone would just be no, there's no chance I'm going to try it.
Esselmont would be the most appropriate candidate, and that guy can write beautifully too. I think he deserves to be in the conversation of absolutely best fantasy writers out there right now. He's different though. Everybody has their own style. The one thing I feel like Esselmont and Erickson share in their writing is a certain kind of humor. And I think it stems from their gaming together. They gamed the Malazan world long before either of them ever wrote a word for their novels or their screenplay, which they actually started with a screenplay, I believe. But they had this shared humor, which is, and of course, there's all the famous Malazan duos because they were gaming this together, and they were often, I think, riffing off of each other. So they have this humor that I think is similar, but other than that, I think they really do have distinctive styles and different approaches. When you start reading Esselmont, you'll see that his writing is different. It's brilliant, but he does certain things. For example, Esselmont to me is one of the best conjurers of atmosphere you'll come across in fantasy. He's just,
I've heard this.
He is so good at putting you in a scene right from the get-go, and your jaw's on the floor like, what is this place? You know, this is crazy. So both of them kind of go for it in their writing, I think, too. That's another thing maybe they have in common. They really go for it. And yeah, that's part of why Esselmont's atmosphere is just so cool to me. But yeah, so that I think once you start reading, you'll see how they differ as well, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting them to be the same person, because they're different people. So I would expect stylistic differences while obviously having like similar inspirations, and obviously like some of the characters overlap. And I've heard like some people are like, it's kind of almost interesting to see like the two people will write a character slightly differently, because I mean, it would hard for it to be otherwise.
Yeah,
it'd be hard for Erikson to write Esselmont characters exactly like Esselmont, or vice versa.
Yeah, there are certain characters that do appear in both authors' various series, and it is fun to try to just kind of perceive, okay, this is Esselmont's version of Krupp or whatever.
It's going to be interesting.
Oh my God, you're gonna love it.
Yeah,
yeah,
man, that would be a challenge writing.
Oh my goodness, that one particularly, because when they gamed everything, it was Steven Erikson who played Krupp. So it's kind of like his character. So for Esselmont to write a novel with Krupp in it, is kind of, which is, by the way, it's Orb Scepter Throne. It poses a certain challenge, right? Because this character is very much Erikson's character, I think, even though it's a shared universe. So, but he took on a novel that was set in Darujhistan, and so, which is really cool, because you not only do you get Esselmont's take on certain characters which are more associated with Erikson's series, but you also get his take on Darujhistan, and which is a character in itself. I mean, it's a very richly
it's like, ooh, atmosphere writer. I see Darujhistan. I can use that.
Yeah.
Although I guess there are like, Malazan has various like narrators, like stuff going on with that. So you could get away with being like, well, that's why these character interpretations are different, because it's like, there's actually the book I'm reading does that a little bit, because I'm going through the Black Company right now.
Oh, Glenn Cook. Yeah.
I'm
big influence on both, I think.
I can tell. Yeah. I can tell. It's very much the vibe of the Malazan Marines.
Yes.
You can tell he read Glenn Cook, and he really enjoyed that. The vibe of like somewhat ridiculous jokes, but also they're kind of scary if you're on the opposite side. Battle with them. Also the aspect of like humans interacting with like near immortals, pseudo immortals, people who don't age, but also like if you stab them in the face, they'll probably die. You know what I mean?
Maybe if you stab them a whole bunch of times.
Yeah, a whole bunch of times in the face, especially for Black Company. There's some people being mostly dead. There's a spree of people being mostly dead in the Black Company.
The death is similar in the Malazan world too, right? I mean,
how many of the Black Company books have you read? All of them, or
no? I've only read the first trilogy, the first three. Okay. That's the Books of the South, or
Books
whatever?
of the North. So you got Books of the South next. I really enjoyed Books of the South. I've enjoyed. It's been an extremely consistent series for me.
Yeah.
Where some series it's like I'll love a book and then I'll be like, I didn't love this book. These have been like I've they've all just been like, I really enjoyed that. That was really good. Which is not what I was expecting. I'm not gonna, my expectations going into the Black Company was like, I have no idea if I'm gonna like this at all. And then I started reading, I was like, even book one, which is kind of structurally very different from the others, it's almost a collection of novellas. Like, it's got like 10 chapters, and like each chapter is pretty self-contained, and it'll like jump over to a completely different chapter. And then, I mean, this book, the book I'm reading, which is Bleak Seasons, has like a 2-sentence chapter. I'm on chapter 79.
Wow. That's a lot of chapters. Yeah.
He went full reverse. He was like, first, I was reading The Black Company, and I got to like page 60, and I was like, oh, I guess Glenn Cook is just one of the authors who doesn't do chapters, like Terry Pratchett. And then I got to chapter 2, and I was like, never mind. It's just a really, really long chapter 1. And then I got to book 2, and chapter 1 is 3/4 of a page. I'm like, what? What is this? What is going on? But
doing his own thing. Yeah, it's been so long since I read the first 3 Black Company books. I do remember the doctor of the Black Company is the one who's keeping the records, right?
Croker, yeah.
Croker, yep. I remember the lady. Is that even what they call her? The lady?
That is what they call her, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a you could see, as you said, the influence with the way the Marines and the Malazan world, the dialogue, the humor, and yeah, as you said, the way they approach their interactions with much more powerful beings, and a lot of that is definitely stemming from Glenn Cook's actual like lived experience as a Vietnam War veteran. So yeah, that's a big part of it actually. And it's interesting how both Erickson and Esselmont have managed to, capture that in their books. So yeah. And I think they both also would attribute, they both also read other Vietnam War veteran authors, like Tim O'Brien, for example.
That makes sense.
Yeah, who have written more, realism or whatever. The things they carried. For example, by Tim O'Brien.
Contemporary?
Tim O'Brien is still around, I believe. Yeah.
No, as in like they wrote contemporary books, like books set in.
Yeah, so he was writing about the Vietnam War and the things they carried. It's the setting is the Vietnam War. And he's writing. So it's not fantasy, in other words. So it's literary fiction, whatever. It's actually an incredible collection of short stories, the things they carried. I actually teach the title story, which is the things they carried in quotes, as opposed to the book, which is in italics, the things they carried. But it's a similar, I think you would recognize the ways in which the soldiers cope with the crap, the situation they've been thrown into, with a kind of very almost stoical kind of humor, very kind of, sometimes deadpan, but a kind of everything's going to hell all around us, but we got to sort of maintain our calm somehow, and a lot of it is done through this very kind of dry humor. So you see it in Tim O'Brien too, and I think that's you definitely see that in Malazan, and it's a big part of the Malazan humor as well. It's a bit gallows humor at times, but it's just you can see these soldiers dealing with stuff that's way beyond them, even in like the Tim O'Brien stuff. They're in over their heads. They're trying to just survive and hold on to a little piece of their humanity in the midst of these really awful circumstances, which, if you're in any kind of military unit, you have to be part of it. You have to, in order for it to function, and you have to lose a lot of your individuality to some degree. But at the same time, there's sort of a paradox here. I think there's a tendency to sort of cling onto your individuality. So, there's that certain soldier who wears a card in his helmet, and that's the guy with the card in his helmet, or there's a soldier who wears in Tim O'Brien, there's one who wears his girlfriend's pantyhose around his neck, or there's the one who carries a Bible around, or there's little,
or a hair shirt,
or a hair shirt in Malazan. Exactly. Yeah. You see the connection.
Yeah.
Where there's these attempts to preserve their individuality and their humanity in the midst of having to be part of this larger unit that is constantly having to suppress their very human responses to the hell, the suffering, the dying all around them. So yeah, it's just really well done in all cases here, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think actually it's kind of fun. The like military stuff. I like Malazan more than Black Company. I just kind of think Erikson is a more skilled writer, to be honest.
There's a bigger range there.
Yeah.
There's just one aspect of Black Company that appears in Malazan, and it's done well. But Erikson does other stuff too. Yeah.
But I will say the actual military company stuff is the one part of Black Company that I enjoy more, which is good because that's what it's about. So if I did enjoy that part quite a bit, while I like the Malazan Marine stuff, it's definitely not my favorite parts of Malazan. My favorite parts of Malazan is more, I love the family drama stuff. This is why Midnight Tides is one of my favorites.
Interesting.
I love the like people interacting with, my two favorites are the two with the least Marines. It's Midnight Tides and Toll the Hounds. Or like if you say, what are your two favorite books in Malazan? It's those two.
Interesting. Yeah, Toll the Hounds. I feel like people either love that one or they struggle.
Bottom two or top two. The funny thing was Toll the Hounds, it's the one I have the hardest time articulating why it's my favorite. Like I just know that when I read it, I got the most out of it and I enjoyed it the most of any of the 10. But it's hard to actually for me to say like these are the things about Toll the Hounds other than it just felt like the writing, I don't know, it just hit different. I got to the end and I was just like, that was amazing.
I love Toll the Hounds. I would put it up there among my favorites too, and particularly on the second read. I don't know that I've ever read a more moving portrayal of grief and love and how the two are so intertwined. And that is something that Erikson just nails in Toll the Hounds. It is just something that it's a hard book in some ways too, because of that grief part of it. But at the same time, there's such beauty in that. And I find it to be, Malazan has so many sublime moments in it, but I think Toll the Hounds maybe has more than its fair share. Even
it has its fair share, and there are. I'm now going to, for now and Joe. Alan likes to be like, oh, people just like the ending, and then they forget about the first 800 pages. Well, I have Discord reactions, so you can see 800 pages in. I was really enjoying it, but also, Alan, I can just be like, you won't be on this train because you love both these books, but I can be like, oh, for Dust of Dreams, people just like the beginning, and then they forget the 800 pages after that, and then I guess the ending is quite cool. But you won't be on that train because you'll be like, they're both really good, damn it, stop. This is whenever people will be like arguing in Discord, and they'll be doing like they'll just be jokingly like both be like Craftmasters. I'm like, I like both those series, stop it. Why can't we be friends? I like most books.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, for me, it's with Malazan. I joke a little bit, but it's sort of maybe half true. Whatever book is the one I'm currently reading is my favorite, So I would not even want to try to do like a tier ranking of Malazan books or something like that.
You could do one on April 1st where you have the tier list up, but then you just start putting them all in S tier.
Yeah, that's
and just for the entire video, just go like, House of Chains. I think it's got some amazing like one POV stuff. Really introduces like some of the marine companies. Has a beautiful ending. That's gonna have to go in S tier. Midnight Tides, amazing humor, some incredible duos, fantastic family dynamics. Some of those that's got to go in S tier, or just go through like the entire Malazan worlds. put them all in
All
S tier.
S tier.
Yeah, that could be a Philip Chase tier list.
Oh, I would get probably a few comments on that one.
That would be funny.
But I could do that, all the Malazan books, the whole,
Yeah, like all like 20 something.
yeah. I mean, those guys are gonna, I think they're gonna pass 30, you know, and all the books in the Malazan world. If you count each Bocaline and Kerbal Broach novella separately, especially, they're easily gonna pass 30. So yeah.
Okay. Well, it's gonna be a long tier list video then.
Yeah, yeah. Although, I mean, people will probably catch on after I put the first like 12 or 15 in the S tier, right? I mean, yeah.
You have to find a way to order them so it's plausible that if you were actually doing a real tier list, that the first 12 would be S tier anyways.
Yeah.
What if you actually go, I'm going to go from best to worst, actually. I'm going to start with my favorites. I'm going to start with my favorites. And then at the end of the video, be like, okay, so those are all the ones that are my favorites, and just go in a random order for your favorites. And then that way people be like, okay, he's getting his favorites out of the way, but that's actually just the entire video.
Yeah.
Could work. I'm just saying it could work.
It would be brilliant, I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if people want to see me do a Malazan.
Yeah, I don't know if people want to see you troll people.
Tier ranking video now, probably not, but the cat's out of the bag. But
people forget about
idea.
this. People will forget this conversation happened. Don't worry about it. Or we can be like Brian Lee Durfee. Someone edit this out after, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. He's funny. Yeah. Yeah. So
it's funny how different his books are from like his YouTube channel.
Oh yeah. I haven't read his books yet.
Yeah.
I will someday.
They're like writing style wise, like they're completely different. Like you
Really?
could not match book to author. You know, there's some authors talking and you feel like, you know, if I had to read a bunch of books blindly and then pick which author based on the talking, like you totally do it with Erickson. You could totally do it with Brandon. I think you could do it with like Jim Butcher. You could do it with a Guy Gavriel Kay. You could not do it with Brian Lee Durfee. It'd be your last guess. It'd be impossible.
I mean, they're kind of grim, aren't they? Is that
they are, but also like they're more writing style wise. They're pretty long, like it's almost, how would I describe it? I mean, scene setting wise, his favorite author is Tad Williams, right?
Okay.
Scene setting wise, like it's more like Tad Williams-esque, which is just, it wasn't what I associated with Brian Lee Durfee, like the writing style.
Huh.
They're good books though. They're definitely worth reading.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so many books I need to read.
I know there's so many. There's more books than there is time.
But I do like the idea of reading his books, just because, you know, A, I've heard that they're good, and B, I also want to support a fellow booktuber, you know, / author. So yeah, and he's funny too. So
he is his review of Redwall, like the like kids series about like the mice, I think might be my favorite booktube video. Sorry, every other booktuber, but I mean, go watch it and then come back to me and tell me I'm wrong. Like it.
Finally, I was laughing. Durfee's review of Redwall. Okay.
The first book, yeah, where he basically gets out of the way, like this was a remarkable little story, and then it's him trying to figure out the scale for like 10 minutes. It's like, are these like mice-sized mice in a mouse-sized city? Who built the city? Are they mouse-sized mouse in a human-sized city? Are they human-sized mice in a human-sized city? And he starts bringing up all these contradictions.
Oh my god, you cannot overthink the talking animal thing, you know.
But apparently, like, people commented, it's like, yeah, the scale was a little bit inconsistent for book one. Don't worry about it after all that.
Oh no.
So he's trying to figure it out for like the video.
Wow. Well, I think it's time for me to torture you with my usual question for my guests.
I'm excited for this question.
Good. I am too. So what I always ask people, the one thing I always ask every guest on Dear Dr. Fantasy is I want to get a sense of who you are, Jake. I want to know, who is Jake really? And you know what? Since you are what you read, if you would kindly give us a sense of your reading history, your reading journey, what brought you to be the person you are today. And maybe even from there, we can talk about what brought you to BookTube and why you have a channel and all that. So, but first, let's talk about what are the most important reads that you can remember off the top of your head right now, from the little tyke, Jake, little fella, up to the present.
For sure. So I can tell you the first books I read were the Harry Potter books, which were being read aloud to me. And my mother strategically stopped at cliffhanger parts to try and teach me to read, where she'd stop out and she'd be like, oh, I'm tired. Gonna have to stop here for the night. And so eventually I was like, give me that book. I was like, I'll just do it.
It's almost like torture, but it was brilliant on her part.
Yeah, she was very much trying to raise two readers, and she very much succeeded. So good job, Mom.
Yeah,
probably watching this. Hi, Mom.
My mom taught me to ride a bicycle in a similar manner, just like holding on to the seat. I was, like 5 or whatever, holding on to the seat behind, without training wheels. I mean, holding on to the seat behind me and running behind me, and then, without me knowing, let go of the seat. And I was just like pedaling away, not knowing that she had let go. And then of course I realized, wait, where are you? And then I was like, and it crashed.
The wisdom of Antilar Maximus, who I'll get to in a second. I'll come back to that. Okay. And so next I read a lot of like the more kids, like I read Percy Jackson, and I remember I liked Percy Jackson more at the time. I read Percy Jackson a lot. I read like The Inheritance Cycle. A rather cool teacher had us read The Hobbit in grade 7. And then I also read some non-fantasy books, but there was a book where when I read it, I was like, okay, fantasy, this is my thing. And it was The Final Empire in grade 9. I remember, and I read The Final Empire, and I was like, I want more of that. And then I went
Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, people call it Mistborn now, because it's book 1 of Mistborn.
The Mistborn trilogy.
Yeah, because originally it was called The Final Empire, but apparently people got confused because it has final in the title and it's book 1. So now it has to be called Mistborn. Whatever, it's The Final Empire in my heart. So that's what matters. And then I also read the Allure books by Jim Butcher, not Dresden first. I read Allure first. I read it. I liked Dresden more eventually by a little bit, but I did read Allure first, which is where the wisdom of Antilar Maximus comes from, which is in that series at one point, someone is trying to tell him something is impossible. And he's like, no, don't tell me. If I know it's impossible, I won't be able to do it. But I have many times done things that I later learned were impossible due to the ignorance of not knowing they were impossible, which is how you rode a bike. You're like, as soon as it's like, oh, I'm not riding a bike. But as soon as there's no help, it's like, now you can't do it. And then I read more stuff by those authors. And throughout high school, I know you hear the story a lot of like, I stopped reading through high school. I didn't fully stop reading. I mostly stopped reading new books. I reread a lot in high school. I added a couple other series. I read A Song of Ice and Fire at a rather young age because I wanted to get ahead of the TV show that people were watching. And I was like, one of the most fun times is watching other people watch a TV adaptation that will have shocking moments. It's like, they're all popcorn looking at TV. I'm popcorn looking at them watch the TV.
So you were looking at them during the Red Wedding?
Yes, absolutely. I was waiting for that. I was excited for the Red Wedding. I was like, oh, I can't wait. This is going to be fantastically entertaining. And you know what? It was fantastically entertaining. I read the King Killer Chronicles. I read some other books that every once in a while I forget about, but someone will mention. It's like, oh yeah, I read that in like grade 10 or something. Like Vicious by V. Schwab. But the main ones, I also read, obviously, the other stuff by Brandon and Jim Butcher. So I read Dresden, and at first I was like, well, it's obviously not as good as Allura, but whatever, I'm still having a really good time. And then at some point I was like, wait, is this as good as Allura? Then I was like, wait, is this better than Allura? I'm confused. My entire worldview has been revolved now that, I've got House Dresden. I have this shirt. And I read Stormlight as well. And I reread Stormlight. And then I reread Dresden. And then I reread Mistborn. And then I reread Stormlight over and over and over until at some point I was like, people keep talking about this Wheel of Time thing. And I read the first few Wheel of Time books and I was like, this is pretty great. And I found BookTube and I was like, hey, this guy really likes Wheel of Time and Stormlight. I need to read new books. So what it is, I went to Daniel Green, and he has a tier list of fantasy series.
Yep.
And I just took all the S tier ones, and I add them to them I want to read on Goodreads. I was like, you know what? I'll just read all of these. Whatever. Well, this seems like they should, in theory, be pretty good. They're in the S tier. That's what S tier means, you know? If I'd watched Philip's video, that would have meant I just read Malazan for the next 10 years.
Well, Daniel Green, I mean, he's got a slightly larger channel than mine.
Slightly, yeah.
And he's definitely a Wheel of Time fan. So yeah, he's the
So anyway, then I got through Wheel of Time and I started reading his S tier series. And by the time I got through those S tier series, there was about 16 million other books that I then wanted to read. So then we were good. And then at that point, I joined his Discord at some point. And then I joined other Discords. And so now there are lots of people who I know like quite well, like taste wise. And so I've gotten very good at finding books that I will like, which is, I think, one reason why I mostly have positive reviews on my channel. I think there are a lot of books that if I read, I wouldn't like them, but I don't want to read those books.
Yeah, the number of books that I have read since starting the channel and not liked is pretty small. And I have chosen not to review a few where I was like, you know what, I don't want to be that negative. I don't want to be that down on an author, especially if it's a self-published book or an indie book or something like that.
I'll do negative reviews, but I think there's a good way to do negative reviews,
yeah.
Which is, I know you said in one of your Dear Dr. Fantasies that you will talk about a book like The Authors in the Room. I don't quite go that far because I think if someone was in the room and didn't want feedback, and didn't like specifically ask for feedback, I would hold myself back. But I think to myself, if I'm going to criticize an aspect of a book, like if an author showed up and challenged me on that criticism, could I defend it? If they were like, okay, but what about this? Doesn't that kind of justify it? Do I think I could defend the criticism? And I've actually, a lot of the times I've thought something was a plot hole, and then I've gone through that situation in my head and I've been like, nah, that actually, there was a defense for that, because I thought like, okay, if the author challenged me on this, how would they challenge me on this? And this is one way I've come to, I tend to naturally, like, if I'm reading something and I think there's a plot hole, it annoys me. Like, I can't not notice it. I almost wish I didn't, because then I would probably enjoy some books more. Right. But I've started to think that for whatever reason, book writers are better than TV show writers at not having plot holes. I don't know why they are. Like, I've almost never see a TV show with as few plot holes as an average fantasy novel.
Yeah. I have a thought on that. We can return to that if you want.
And I've generally found that the more you think about a plot hole, the more likely it is that there's an explanation. Yeah. And that a lot of things that people will be like, it's like we'll be like, oh, I think this is a plot hole. But like, the more you think about it, you'll actually often be like, you know, there actually is like a completely plausible explanation from this that wasn't expressly told to us, but that's because expressly telling us would just be a waste of page count, because we can infer that that's what happened. My general example for this is, it's like if someone purchased a piece of chicken to later consume, and then later you see them eating it, and people will be like, why aren't they getting salmonella? They ate a raw chicken breast. It's like, okay, well, they probably cooked it. That would just be a rather boring scene. So the author didn't include them turning on the oven and putting on salt and pepper and putting it in the oven and then taking it out.
Yeah, they just, don't want to put all that in your book.
Showed the conversation they had with other people while they were eating, and they're in fact not eating a raw chicken breast, and will therefore not get salmonella.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good example of kind of show, don't tell, let the reader infer that the chicken has indeed, the goose has been cooked, right? And
you can tell the goose has been cooked because they're not getting salmonella.
Yeah, I mean,
and they're not being like, this is gross, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, I read a lot of series, and I've been going strong. And at some point, found someone, a new favorite author. Not when I read Farseer. When I read Farseer, I was like, this was good. And then I took a big break. And eventually I read Live Ship. And Live Ship, even among Realm of the Elderlings, Live Ship it's barely my favorite. It's hard. Like, Live Ship, Tawny Man, and Fitz and the Fool are like 1A, 1B, 1C. They're all so good. But I think Live Ship is still my favorite.
Interesting. Yeah, I had a similar reaction to reading the Farseer trilogy, after which, and I read it before I started my YouTube channel, but I read it and I thought, wow, this is okay. Probably if I had done a ranking in those days, she would have been in my top 15 or so. And then I read Live Ship and okay, this is top 3 now. So I had a similar reaction when I read Live Ship. It was just, wow, this is okay. I see what people are talking about with the character work now. Whoa.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, after I read Live Ship, funnily enough for Farseer, I was kind of weird in that Fitz was not my favorite character in the Farseer trilogy.
Interesting.
I was like, I like Fitz, especially in Assassin's Creed, like especially as you go through the series. But I felt like the other characters kind of just had more personality, which I think, like, so I reread Assassin's Apprentice and Royal Assassin. Those are the only 2 I've reread. We're going through it slowly again. But Assassin's Apprentice, I realized Fitz, this is not a spoiler, this is like page 1. Fitz starts with like no memory before the age of 6. Right. So he's kind of a blank, which this is a weird thing to say about a first person point of view of my favorite character ever. But in book 1, for the start of book 1, he's kind of a blank slate. Like he's kind of just in sponge mode. And then you see his personality and tendencies develop from the events and environment that he's in. And Realm of the Elden is the only series that I've ever reread where I will read a thing in book 1 and will be like, okay, that decision he makes 25 years later makes sense now.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it is a first person narration, like you said, and it's a bit tougher, I think, to, first of all, it's possible easier, I think, to make that narrator, who is usually the protagonist, very much alive in the reader's mind. So for many people, Fitz is just very rich, 3-dimensional.
He's my favorite character.
In Farseer. It's a harder thing in a first-person narration to give the other characters as much life and 3-dimensionality, and I think she's really good at it. Yeah. But that's where a third person is easier to give just all kinds of characters, believability, But I think Hobb pulls it off anyway. I think that's one reason why Live Ship, which is a third-person narration, you have more characters that have the kind of depth. So without any spoilers, to me, the villain in Live Ship is so much more 3-dimensional than the villain in Farseer.
And I think someone was talking about this on Discord, and I think one of the reasons is the villain in Farseer, we only ever see him from the perspective of someone he kind of hates.
Exactly.
So every time we see him, he's miserable. But villains in Live Ship we'll see from perspective of people he hates, but also from perspective of people that he gets along with quite well.
And from his own perspective.
And from his own perspective. There's kind of 2 villains in Live Ship. One is my favorite. One is the point of view one is my favorite villain in fantasy.
Yeah. Oh, I could see why. Yeah. I mean, it's just, so I feel like where you do get some characters who are very kind of stereotypical, particularly the villains in Farseer, Live Ship is different. But the payoff is Fitz just is so rich and so wonderful and so easy to connect to in Farseer. So that's the difference, perhaps, is that which narrative choice you make there, and you lose something and you gain something by making that decision. But she handles both beautifully. And it's not like I'm quibbling or anything. Just I think that's a fair observation, is that the villains in Live Ship are just much more dynamic and 3-dimensional and interesting. So yeah.
See, the villain in Farseer was something where I kind of coming in thinking like, okay, this probably like something she thought of. So I really tried to see the Farseer villain through the lens of like, I tried to be like, okay, figure out like, what is it that's making him succeed? Yeah. And I remember the first time I read Royal Assassin, Royal Assassin was the first time my favorite of the 3. I still really loved it, but I had a minor quibble. And that was, I didn't think the story would have made sense from the perspective of the villain. And I disagree with Past Me now. After reread, I think Past Me, I can see where Past Me is coming from here. I don't think this was a ridiculous take from Past Me, but I do think Past Me was slightly mistaken.
You're gonna have to arm wrestle yourself to figure out what it is, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be a tough. There's gonna be a dear Jake Bishop where I'm gonna argue with past me, and I'll win that argument because I know
No
exactly
doubt.
what past me was thinking, and past me doesn't know exactly what current me was thinking.
Ooh.
So I have a huge advantage.
You do. I almost feel sorry for past you now.
But anyway, what I was saying with that is, so after Live Ship, Fitz was
Yeah.
like my 10th favorite Hob character, which was kind of funny. And then after the first Tawny Man book, he jumped to like 1.
Yeah.
And then he just extended the lead for his remaining 6 books. And now, I mean, I made a top 10 favorite fantasy characters, and putting him 1 was a pretty easy decision.
Yeah.
And I think on reread, nothing's changing. He's just going to be won by even more.
Wow. So Realm of the Elderlings is your favorite series of all
It's
time.
my favorite series. For a while, like Stormlight is the holdout. I know Stormlight would not be one of your favorite, but you like Stormlight. Stormlight was the holdout for a while.
Yeah.
Where like I love all 4 Stormlight books. And there are Realm of the Elderlings books I don't love. I do not love Dragon Keeper.
Interesting.
Okay. But there's so many Realm of the Elderlings books like I absolutely do love. And eventually I had to think about it for a while for like favorite series. Hob being my favorite author was pretty easy after Realm of the Elderlings because I like it a lot more than all the Brandon stuff that isn't Stormlight or the Emperor's Soul.
Right.
But Stormlight was closer. But at the end of the day, I was just like, I think I have to give it to Realm of the Elderlings just for like keeping it up for 16 books.
Yeah.
Instead of 4. Granted, 4 really big books, which I mean, they could be. It's funny. So in my head, I generally have like a long series and a short series going at the same time. And in my head, the Black Company is a long series because it's 9 or 10 books, depending on if you count the Silver Spike, which I do. And some books are like 4-book series. And I'm like, that's a short series. Dandelion Dynasty, that's a short series. It's longer than the Black Company. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So, I do like Stormlight. I've read the first 3, haven't yet read Rhythm of War. The 3rd book, Oathbringer, did drag a little for me, if I'm going to be quite honest with you.
It's my least favorite of the 4. I still love it though.
Which one's your favorite?
My favorite would be 2, but Oathbringer is my least favorite of the 4, barely.
Okay.
I liked it more on reread. It's gaining ground every reread.
Yeah. I enjoyed the first 2. I thought there was some really just solid, great stuff going on in there. And to my mind, Sanderson's best character work, although I shouldn't even say that because I haven't read all his stuff. I've only read the original, I'm going to call it Mistborn trilogy.
That's correct. Yeah.
That is correct. Okay.
It's book 1 is not whatever. It's fine.
Mistborn. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then the first 3 Stormlight books, that's all I've read. I'm not a Cosmere reader or whatever. But I do feel like if I'm going to, talk about fantasy, I need to read Brandon Sanderson. He is important for the genre, obviously. And I feel like he's done some really important, good things for the genre. He's brought a lot of people into this like you and Patrick and so many people I know like were brought into fantasy by Brandon Sanderson. So, I feel like the guy, we owe him a big, debt of gratitude just for that. And he does some things really well. For example, he is brilliant at coming up with these intricate magical systems that he weaves into the plot, where the character is discovering the magic along with the reader. And it's a great hook because the reader is also figuring this out. Like, oh, this is cool. You can do this, and there's a kind of a leveling up aspect to his books, as far as I can tell from just Mistborn and Stormlight. There's an aspect to them where the character is figuring out, okay, and this is a lot of fantasy too, by the way. But Sanderson, I think, is maybe the best at it. So just sort of figuring out, okay, this is how the magic works, and you go up a level, and then you encounter something that maybe the villain or, you know, someone else or whatever it might be, but the character is forced to level up again. And there's this sort of leveling up aspect to it where the magic is being discovered, and that's happening for the reader and the character simultaneously. And that's a big part of what I see from those two, you know, those 6 books I've read anyway. That's a big part of what Sanderson does as an author, and does very, very well.
So I think, by the way, you can comfortably say Stormlight is his best character work. It's not going to be uncontroversial. You haven't read his other stuff, but no one's going to disagree with you. No one is going to be like, well, actually, Skyward is his best character work. I like Skyward. Stormlight character work, I think, is much better. I think he does a few things that even still, I reread The Way of Kings last year, and every time I don't reread Stormlight for a while, I'm like, what if I don't like it as much this time? And then every time I read it, I'm like, I like it almost even more. Yeah. And I think Words of Radiance and Way of Kings do a stronger job of establishing the main cast. Oathbringer, like the story with the main cast, is not paced as well. One thing I actually think Oathbringer and Rhythm of War do quite a bit better than the first two is kind of giving the series a deeper bullpen of really, really like well fleshed out characters, where it establishes the side cast. And every single time I reread the Stormlight Archive, I find a character who I now can read about and really enjoy, who I didn't even realize the first 6 times I read it, that they actually had a lot of stuff going on and weren't there. Like literally every time. It's probably going to happen this time. Actually,
interesting. Yeah.
No, Way of Kings, this time I found stuff, but it wasn't that. And I think Oathbringer does that particularly well. That being said, I think Oathbringer also has the weirdest pacing. So I think one of the it's part 2. I think there's a bit that is character-wise, it's like the least focused, where it actually, you have a bunch of like side character point of views. And a lot of people who do not fully click with Brandon's writing, like this is never going to be like their favorite series ever, find that bit drags a bit. But also, like, I see when people react to that, it's some people's like favorite section in the entire series, which I think Brandon is kind of aware of. He's like, whatever, some people aren't going to like this as much, some people will love it. I kind of like basically all of it, but and I also, we're going on the Brandon train because I think there's some stuff he does really well. As you said, like for magic systems, I almost wish that wasn't the main focus of what he does really well, because I think it's not like, I don't actually think it's the magic systems themselves, because I've come to realize I like soft magic more than hard magic, but that's because when I read, that's because I haven't actually read like any other hard magic series that I like as much as Brandon. So it's like, can one guy really make me say I like this more? But I think it's like what you said, the way it's like woven with the other aspects. And I don't even think just plot, like the Emperor's Soul, it helps with like the themes, for example, like the theme of that novel, which is an exploration of art and also what it means to like actually be a human, like what makes up a human. It doesn't exist without the way the magic works. And I think what is led to is some people doing hard magic where they come out with their story and they write their story. And then after they know what their story is, they're like, all right, now I'm going to add a magic system. Which generally what tends to happen is as you go more and more through the series, it ends up focusing more and more on the magic system as they figured out more and more, instead of focusing on the stuff that we kind of care about through the lens of the magic. Because really, like, what I care about is the character and story and the stuff that I care about for every other novel, right?
I think that's fair. Who are other hard magic fantasy writers? I think the Lightbringer series might be another one.
Brent Weeks.
Weeks. I read the first one. I did not continue in the series though.
I read.
It seemed like he was going in a similar direction. I'm guessing that he read Brandon Sanderson, right?
The other actually hard magic book so far series that I've really, really enjoyed, but I'd put it on a scale because no magic is like fully hard or fully soft. So I have a scale. I have a 1 to 10 scale, and 1 is pre-crisis Superman. He can do whatever the author wants it, what the writer wants him to do. He needs to turn back time now. He can turn back time. He needs to be able to make toast in a minute instead of 2. He has that power. It's fully, I think it's the least hard magic system I could think of. And then the hardest was, unsurprisingly from Sanderson, would be, remember Furukami, where it's like you store stuff and then use it? That
For
specifically
Mistborn.
for pewter, you literally can use math to determine the limitations. So that's my scale. And I think the other hard magic books that I've liked quite a bit is The Rage of Dragons, like The Burning, which you read recently, I believe, book 1.
I read Rage of Dragons, yeah.
And I'd say that's like a 7 hard magic, maybe even an 8 on some days.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed that quite a bit. And I think I enjoyed it for the same reason. Like that book, if you change the details of the magic system, like it's a different book now.
Yeah.
You couldn't, it's not just the action scenes that are different. Like the book is different, especially the back half. And the second book would be even more different, which I think if you can wildly change your magic system and the actual like nothing else about the story changes, your magic system probably isn't adding that much to the story. That's my take.
Right.
And I think like this is, so I read Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett, which I think the magic system is fantastically cool. Like it's really cool. And then I enjoyed book 1, and then I actually DNF'd book 2. Sorry, Robert Jackson Bennett. And it's because I felt like the only thing I was enjoying about it was that the magic system was cool. And also it introduced a character who was like, one of my kind of pet peeves is I'm somewhat picky for really, really old fantasy characters. I find a lot of time they feel like 30-year-olds who you're just told they're really, really old. And there was like a multi-thousand-year-old character who like 30's way too mature for this guy. Like he was torturous. Every scene I read of him, I wanted to just like throw the book.
To be fair, some of us become less mature as we age. So
that's fair. But I mean, it's just, he's the least I've ever believed a character is really old. There's like 4 authors who can convince me someone is 4,000. And Erickson played on hard mode because he's not like, these aren't 4,000, these are 300,000-year-olds.
Yeah.
And I'm just
4,000. That's,
and I'm just like 300,000 Erickson. Like, how are you going to make that believable? I don't. So even from a lot of that times, I'm like, are you really 300,000? I'm not convinced anyone can actually pull off a 300,000-year-old. I don't know if it's possible, but 4,000-year-old. Actually, Tolkien, he does 1,000-year-olds. Like Gandalf is old. Yeah. Elrond is old. Galadriel is old. Like, there's no way Galadriel is a 40-year-old who you're told is however old Galadriel is.
Yeah. You get a sense of her just tiredness, and she's been around the block a few times, and Gandalf is actually like basically an angelic being, you know? He's also been around, but you get the sense that there's something really ancient to this individual that's beyond human understanding.
It's often a nitpick where it's like, doesn't affect my enjoyment that much, but usually a fan, I'm just at the end of the review, like, by the way, I don't buy it. This person's 5,000 years old. Actually, here's a series I read recently that pulled it off. The Stone Eaters in The Broken Earth. I was these people are these beings are as old as as I've been.
Totally different mental, what's going on inside here is just very different, foreign from what would be going on in our head.
I think Jim Butcher does it very well. I buy
with the fairy and stuff.
With a lot of the people. You had Death Masks? Is that the most recent one you've read?
So I've only read the first 4.
First 4. Okay, Death Masks is next. So Death Masks has an antagonist who's 2,000-ish. And it's kind of like, I buy he's 2,000. I believe you, Jim Butcher. This is a 2,000-year-old.
Cool.
And Mab is 1,000. But Dresden, it's kind of hard to compare to early Dresden. I know people say this all the time, but it's true. You'll see what we mean. Whatever.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing in Dresden. I got some other stuff I have to read first, like every other booktuber. But I'm kind of saving up the Dresden at this point for when I can read them in quick succession, because I don't want to put off, I don't want to read one and then wait for several months. And then I want to get to a point where I can do one a month. And then
I think what you can do is for the early ones, like usually this is how people kind of recommend you read Dresden, which I think is the best way to do it, is for the early ones, just save them for when you want like a fun, fast story following a sarcastic wizard. And so, you know, if you're like in the mood something, go, oh, I'll read Death Masks. And then at some point it becomes more than that. And then at some point you
point to you? What is that point?
What would be that? So I actually shouldn't say a point, because this is again a narrative that I think is slightly oversimplified, where people will act like Dresden is this good, and then it hits a point, and then suddenly it's this good.
Because I've heard different versions of this. Some people say, "Oh, it's book 3."
This is why.
No, it's book 4.
There isn't one answer, because it's actually, it just pretty steadily trends up forever with some kind of outliers.
I've heard that like 6 is not.
6 is kind of an outlier down, and then 12 is an outlier up.
Okay.
In my opinion. So where it kind of takes off you is going to depend, because it's not like it's going to be bad and then suddenly it's going to be amazing. Like it's going to be fine, and then it's going to be pretty good, and then it's going to be really good, and then it's going to be excellent, and then it's going to be fantastic. Like, rather slowly. So I mean,
but for you personally, if you can remember,
I was binging them anyways, because I'd already read Allure, and I was just like, I was on a trip, and I was like, let's read Dresden. So, but I mean, the first one I gave 5 stars on Goodreads was 7, was Deadbeat.
Okay, I've heard a lot of good things about 7.
Yeah, and I think like once people get to 7, I'm like, there's basically no weak books past 7.
After
like,
7,
7 and on, I think there are books that aren't as good. And by not as good, I mean not as good as like books like 7 and 10 and 11. Not as good as 5. I like every, from 7 and on, I like every book more than the first 4.
Okay. Wow. All right.
Where it just kind of generally continually trends up. I don't know.
I did feel like Summer Night book 4 was better than the first 3.
I like it more. Summer Night is almost becoming more divisive now. I don't know why.
Is it?
It used to almost be like, I feel like when Dresden was slightly smaller and it was more like there's the Dresden fans, I don't know, people like Summer Night more. And now I feel like I do see a lot of people, I've actually seen it be people's least favorite.
Really?
I have a random theory that Malazan readers like Summer Night more, because a lot of the time when people don't like Summer Night as much, it's because of the amount of stuff that was thrown at them. But like, if you've read Memories of Ice, it's not that much stuff being thrown at you in Summer Night.
No, it's not. No. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, we're all prepped in different ways for our next reads based on what we read before. So yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, because then I like 5 more than the first 4. And then 6 is, I think, from a developing of the side cast, is as good, maybe even the best of the first 6, but it just, the cases aren't as good. And I think the plot isn't as interesting. So I almost think in some ways it's like the best of the first 6, but then in some ways it's the worst of the first 6, which kind of averages out to, I like it more than Stormfront and Full Moon.
Yeah, for me so far, I would say probably Full Moon was my least favorite. That's 2, right? Yeah.
2, yeah. I think the most common pick. Alan insists it's better than 1 and 3, but sorry, Alan, I disagree.
We're gonna disagree with Alan.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I'm looking forward to getting further into the series. I have been, with each book, starting to feel like, okay, I can see myself really kind of getting on this train here and enjoying it. So we'll see where that goes, but I'm going to certainly continue from 4 at some point this year. You know, I'd like to, I even said maybe I could get to some of them this summer, but I don't know how realistic that is. So, because I've got some big chunky reads ahead of me. I'm rereading the last book in Malazan Book of the Fallen right now. So Crippled God.
That's a chunker, yeah.
Chunker. And then after that, I'm finishing Ian Esselmont's novels of the Malazan Empire with A Sail, and that's also not a skinny book. And then I'm going to be reading Jenny Wirtz's Wars of Light and Shadow series, starting that, and I'm beginning with Curse of the Mistwraith, which is a huge book. So yeah, I got some big reads ahead of me.
Well, if you want to turn your brain off and read about a sarcastic wizard. That being said, those are actually, there's 2 series that aren't Dresden that I would push to you There's two series specifically that I'm like, one actually, I mean, I'm on a quest right now to get people to read more Guy Gavriel Kay because he's the author of the year for me. He'd be like top 3, maybe top 2 on a good day.
Okay.
So
you've got Hobb and Sanderson and GGK.
Yeah, and would be my top 3. It's kind of I like Stormlight more than Guy Gavriel Kay stuff. You'll probably like Guy Gavriel Kay stuff more than Stormlight, and Brandon likes Guy Gavriel Kay stuff more than Stormlight, but whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, he called Guy Gavriel Kay the greatest living author of epic fantasy, so he's a bit of a fan.
Interesting. I did not know that. Huh. Yeah.
Yes, one kind of funny thing about apparently he really likes the Black Company.
Brandon Sanderson does.
Yeah, he likes books that are very different from what he
writes.
Yeah. But
I feel like Sanderson, just to pause on that thought maybe a little, I feel like he understands what's going to be accessible for people, which is why I said before, I feel like he's brought a lot of people into the genre, and that's a huge compliment.
I think he gets what works storytelling wise, and he knows what he's good at, because he knows if he tried to write the Black Company, it wouldn't be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard that. He said like when he was writing like his books with like these weird magic systems and kind of weird worlds, publishers were like, we kind of want shorter George R. R. Martin. And at one point he was like, I'll try, and it was terrible. Like he says he wrote it, like he tried to write more gritty and more low magic, and he's just like, they're terrible. They were awful.
They're storming awful.
Yes, they were storming awful. Yeah. And so then he was like, you know what? Screw the publishers. They say these books are too long. I'm gonna write The Way of Kings.
You know what? I think he's smart for understanding his own strengths and going with them. So yeah,
I think he's kind of like, because I think the two authors who I like more, I think Guy Gavriel Kay and Robin Hobb as writers are almost unquestionably more talented as writers. I think he has done better than any other author at taking what his skill set and like getting the absolute most out of it.
Yeah, well, he's obviously done well with it. I mean, there's no arguing that. So yeah.
But anyways, that's not the series I put. I'm here now to stand Guy Gavriel Kay.
Okay.
Because if there was one series that I would, if someone pointed a gun at me, it's like, you need to predict a series that Philip Chase will love, I'd be like, and then I would pick the Sarantine Mosaic by Guy Gavriel Kay without thinking, which I think you'll like basically all his books, but Sarantine especially. I actually think, and I'm going to use the word I learned earlier, I think some of his other books are more Ericksonian than Tigana. Okay. Where when I read Tigana, I was kind of like, writing style wise, it felt like almost like historical fantasy mixed with like Tolkien, like somewhat Tolkien-esque, and a little bit hornier. A lot hornier than Tolkien. A lot hornier.
Yeah, I mean, there's zero sex in Tolkien.
Yeah, and there's more than zero in Tigana.
Yes.
And then Lions of Alrasson, for example, which is his other, like his second most famous book.
Yeah.
It's a lot more, like it's less clear who the baddies are. Tigana, I think like the antagonist, the main one, is a rather complex character, but also like there's two people you can be like, these are the baddies. And the goal is there's one side where like, I want this side to defeat these people. And then I'll be happy. But in Lions, it's more, both sides are it takes place in like 10th century Spain before the reconquering of the Iberian Peninsula. And
so just to clarify on that, he's more historical fiction than fantasy.
Yes. Yeah. I would describe Tigana as a fantasy that has a twist towards historical fiction. Okay. I would describe almost every book after Tigana as reading more like historical fiction with a twist towards fantasy. And he changes the names. He has an essay about why he does it. It's an annoyingly good answer that I'm not going to try and reproduce because my answer won't be as good. I can reproduce it a little, but it's an annoyingly good answer. And so it'll be set like there will be people who are based on like characters based on real people. It's one of the reasons he changes the names, because he doesn't want to put thoughts in people who are actually like have the same name as real people. But he basically, the inspiration for the book is there was like a really famous dude from like Spain who ended up being like stuff legend, El Cid. And he's like, I'm gonna have a character based on that. And then there was a really famous like poet slash duelist from like the more Islamic side of the Iberian Peninsula, and they both ended up in the same city in real life.
Okay.
And so the book is kind of like they're the lines of our song. And the book is kind of like, okay, there's two sides of these holy war. This holy war is happening. Like, we're gonna get a holy war, and the people from either sides are going to mesh and interact with each other, and you will care to learn to grow to care for people on both sides of that conflict.
Yeah.
But you know the conflict's happening. And
that's good. Yeah.
It's really good.
That's not the one you wanted me to read. You wanted me to read.
I like Serentine Mosaic even more.
Okay.
But partially because Lines of Our Song isn't a series. It's a standalone. Serentine Mosaic, I think, should be a standalone. It's a duology that very much feels like a huge book that got split in two.
Okay. Probably that's what happened.
Yeah, like Sailing to Sarantium kind of just ends, which is why even though Sailing to Sarantium is my favorite Guy Gavriel Case setting and has my favorite Guy Gavriel Case cast of characters.
Okay.
But it also just kind of ends. So it's hard to compare with like some of his other books.
Okay.
But it's set around like the Byzantine Empire in like the 5th century, like Justinian the Great. And it followed like the protagonist is a mosaicist.
So that's definitely a deliberate pun or nod to Sailing to Byzantium, the poem.
Absolutely. Okay. Sarantium is Constantinople, the center of the Byzantine Empire.
Okay, that's what you were talking about with him changing the names.
Yes, because he doesn't actually know for sure what happened in the Byzantine Empire in the 5th century. And he doesn't want to write stuff down because he feels like then he's saying this is what he thinks happens, not this is the story he's trying to tell. And also that way, even if you're very familiar with Byzantine history, you know that some people who live may not be safe because this isn't quite the same. And you know some people, and you don't know for sure that some people who die in history might actually die. So it also keeps a level of suspense for people who are very familiar with
the story.
Time. And yeah, you picked up on the expression because the book Sailing to Sarantium is not nautical fantasy. It's metaphorically sailing to Sarantium. Right. It's actually walking to Sarantium because it's winter and sailing is dangerous.
Yeah. Well, it's a poem about being old, really. Yeah.
Oh, and in this world, it's an expression for like going into like a big change in your life.
Interesting.
So it's anyway. And compared to like it's very POV hoppy.
Okay.
It's probably this is why it's the most Ericksonian of all of his books. That's such a good word.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say example this. This is what the prologue is. Because I remember this because I was like, it was probably 1 a.m. And I was like, I'm just going to read the prologue and then go to sleep. Because usually Guy Gavriel Case prologues are very short. This one is like 65 pages. I still read it.
Yeah.
And it starts with the Emperor dies. Page 1, Emperor's dead.
Start.
Cool stuff. Hey, also Ericksonian. We've been here. And the Emperor also has no clear heirs. So this is a problem. So there's, of course, going to be a scramble as many people try to be an emperor. And we are now going to POV hop. And you would think we would POV hop to the various people trying to become the emperor. But you would be wrong. We POV hop to seemingly completely random and completely unconnected people.
Okay.
A bunch. And then at the end of the chapter, somehow, like some kind of black magic, you understand what has happened and know how this person became the next emperor. That's the prologue, 65 pages.
I like it. That's a good sell for me. I like it.
Yeah, that's if I was gonna pick like one series to be like, yeah, as I said, you don't give stars, but like to enter your top 10, if I was gonna try and pick one series, it'd be Sarantium. I would just warn people not to do like take a big break between Sailing to Sarantium and Lord of Emperors. It would kind of just be like reading half of Toll of Hounds and then waiting a month and then reading the second half.
Or more like, actually, probably the better comparison might be Dust of Dreams and The Crippled God, right? Because it's really one book.
I think this is Sailing to Sarantium feels a lot more like half a book than Dust of Dreams. I even like Dust of Dreams. I think for a normal author could be one book. It's like the thing that makes it not feel like one book is that every other Malazan book like wildly changes locations and characters at the end. and this one doesn't. But like, I mean, I don't know. I've never really, I feel like, you know, if any other author wrote Dust of Dreams and The Crippled God, they'd be like, this is 2 books. It's fine. But Sailing to Sarantium is very much, it's a really good setup book that introduces some really fantastic characters. And also, this is probably something you didn't expect to hear about Guy Gavriel, because he kind of feels like more of a like, just kidding, but like Erikson, it also has some fantastic banter. It has even some soldier banter.
Cool.
And actually it's kind of funny at times. I think Erikson's really funny, especially as you get later in the series. I think his humor improves a lot. But all right, this was my Guy Gavriel K pitch. It should be a pretty easy sell for you. It's the guy who's famous for his gorgeous writing. And it's like, you know, also for Sarantium, that makes it reminds me of Erikson. It's like each chapter is really long, and each chapter almost kind of feels like more self-contained, where basically it never happens in that entire duology, where you will get to the end of one chapter and then the next chapter will start in the same people from like right after. It's always, you'll end one chapter and then you'll go somewhere seemingly completely unrelated, and then it kind of ties together. It's often very non-linear, but it works.
Well, it's joining the list of
yes,
of stuff I need to read. There's like Gene Wolfe there, and there's R. Scott Baker, another Canadian, I believe, right? R. Scott Baker's Canadian.
I'm not sure.
Canadian, maybe somebody can correct me if that's wrong in the comments. But anyway, yeah. And Jenny Wirtz is the one I'm actually going to read like really soon. That's another big one for me that I know I need to read, and I think The Wars of Light and Shadow is going to be a great contender for my favorites as well. So yeah, there's just a ton, and I have to finish Realm of the Elderlings. So
there's so many books. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Someone I think cursed Guy Gavriel K at one point, where people read one of his books, go like, this was really good, and then never. It's not just you. Lots of people do this.
Yeah.
And it's weird because he might be one of the most consistent authors that I've read. Where it's like almost it's kind of, there's somewhere where you feel like they have like what they consider their magnum opus, that they're really trying to make like the best thing they possibly can. And then there are some books that they're trying to make good, but like you can clearly tell a lot of their creative energy and their off time is going towards one thing. I think it would be fair to say this about Brandon for Stormlight. That Brandon knows, like if you ask Brandon, hey, is The Lost Metal going to be the best book you've ever written? He's going to be like, no, it'd be one of the Stormlight books or The Emperor's Soul. Guy Gavriel K, it really feels like every book he gets to, I think this might be partially because it's almost all standalones, where he's really trying to make like every book. He's absolutely trying to make every book his new best book. Because also long series, sometimes you get books with more setup and sometimes you have books with more payoff. But if you have all standalones, I mean, the downside is you have to introduce the world like every time.
Yeah.
But the upside is you can pay it off every time.
Wow. Okay. Well, you're definitely making some of my viewers extremely happy. I'm thinking of you, Mick Scarfield, because there are some people who've been telling me you need to read more Guy Gavriel K, and I know I do, and I will eventually. Well, it's definitely something I've been thinking about doing, because I did love Tigana. I really did. So
you read it a long time ago, right? Like
a long time before you were born, probably.
I was born in 99. So if you read it before 99,
oh, okay.
You read it before I was born.
You might have been in diapers when I read it. But but it was a long time ago. I don't remember exactly when. It was probably the early 2000s, I think. It's been around that long, hasn't it?
I think it came out in like around 1990. He's been writing for a while. He doesn't write super fast, which I think kind of makes sense if you read his books.
I don't think. Yeah, I mean, maybe there are exceptions to this.
I mean, Erikson would be the exception to this.
Yeah, he produced the Malazan Book of the Fallen in just like unbelievable amount of time. In other words, very fast compared to how fat those books are, number one, but also how well written they are. It's actually pretty jaw-dropping.
And how complicated they are as well, right? Like,
yeah,
just keeping track of like what's going on.
For most of us mere mortals, though, there's going to be a correspondence to how much time you put into the book and how good the writing is, right? I mean,
that being said,
yeah,
A Storm of Swords was the Song of Ice and Fire book that took the least time to write.
Interesting. And it's a lot of people's favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this is my theory on this. I think a lot of the time, like someone's general policy, like how much they enjoy editing and how much of a stickler they are,
Right.
will affect this. Like Tolkien took 20 years to write Lord of the Rings. He was probably the only author who was like as much of a stickler as like Rothfuss. Because at some point, like no book is going to be perfect. Neil Gaiman describes a novel as a long piece of prose that has something wrong with it. And at some point, people have to go, okay, diminishing returns, the amount of time I'm spending on this, like it's technically making it better, but it's making it better like an amount that I just don't think is worth it. And where people draw that line is going to differ. But I think if you look at one author, I have the theory that their favorite books tend to be the books they wrote faster, because they have the same editing process for all their books. But if they wrote it faster, they were really in their groove.
They're in the zone. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is true. Wheel of Time books, if you look at the books that are less popular, like the middle ones, they took longer. The earlier books were written quite quickly. Storm of Swords took the least time. Some of the most like universally praised Dresden books took the least time. Sanderson writes everything fast, so it's hard to tell. But yeah, that's my theory, and I think it has a good amount of support.
I think that's reasonable. I mean, the being in the zone thing is definitely true. I mean, I can agree with it just on an individual level. When I've been writing and I feel like, 5 hours go by and it feels like 10 minutes and it feels just great. And I can go back and look at what I did and think, wow, that's really good. I was really feeling it there. So yeah, that's a thing for sure. But I also think that even then, most authors, not all, but most are going to want to go back and tweak and revise and edit.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think their editing process is probably very similar. Like no matter what the book is, like they have the same line. It's just sometimes they find it harder to get there. And I think a lot of times when books take a long time, sometimes it's because people are being very perfectionist. Sometimes I think it's because they just have run into problems, which like the Erikson, like, George famously ran into the Mirror and He's Not, where he had all these plot lines and he couldn't figure where they goes. The fact that never happened to Erikson is mind boggling.
Yeah. Like
the fact that he avoided that for 10 books of insane complexity is mad. Like,
well, I mean, I don't know what his answer to that would be, but partly maybe it helped that he had a partner who helped him create this world and that they gamed a lot of this stuff ahead of time. Not everything, because they did make up stuff, for the novels that they wrote as well. But some of what you read in the novels was gamed, I believe, ahead of time. So that probably allowed them to iron out a lot of inconsistencies and things like that, because those I'm pretty sure those existed as they just gamed the world and as it evolved organically. But the fact that they did game it and that it evolved allowed them, and as a consequence, I think, to have probably a better view of all of that, and they were probably able to help each other. Even I'm sure they were like, do you remember what we did with this character and or what was this place about, and so they had that as well as fans and stuff, but there's such vast worlds these people create. We're talking about Wheel of Time, the Malazan books, Stormlight, Realm of the Elderlings, these big chunky series, Wars of Light and Shadow, that there's a vast amount of, I'm sure the authors do forget, famously Erikson was writing his sequel trilogy, the Witness trilogy, and The God Is Not Willing being the first book. And he was like, I think on his Facebook or something, he asked his fans, do you guys remember what happened with this character? Was this character alive? Because he needed to use this character in the sequel. So they forget too.
Yeah, I know. Like, so Jim Butcher has obviously beta readers, and one of his head beta readers, he started a book and he had a character in there and he was excited to have this character, and then he sent the chapter to his beta readers and they were like, Jim, you killed this person in an earlier book. And he was like, goodness. Yeah, I did that, didn't I? I'd forgotten I'd done that.
Yeah, so Erikson thought ahead and said, maybe I should ask, is this character alive? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I think Erikson has said because Essamont is the one who has all the notebooks, Erickson just remembers things, which is mad. And I think he said he once tried to have a notebook and then he lost that notebook. So he started writing another notebook, and then he found the old notebook, and the notebooks contradicting each other.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
But he has a really good he has a way in world of explaining that the same way Glenn Cook does. There's a really funny passage in the book I'm reading that isn't a spoiler, where the current writer is like, these two past people directly contradicted each other. And I went and asked both of them, and they both insist they're right, and the other person is wrong.
What to do?
They're just like, he's like, they're directly contradicting each other. What is going on? And Erickson, he has kind of a somewhat complicated frame narrative thing type going on that I am not smart enough to explain. I'll be looking for it on reread. But
yeah, sometimes they do that a lot too, where
so now he can just be like, oh yeah, the person writing it wrote it. I know, Carquinez is what I think of. I read page 1 of the first Carquinez book, and the guy's just like, yeah, I'm telling the story. I wasn't actually there. No one really knows what happened. If something's wrong, it's because I made it up. There you go.
Yeah. They do stuff like that all the time. They really poke fun at history a lot, and the notion that we can know the past based on someone's account of it written much later, is this something that they consistently tear down in the Molasse books, which
one of my favorite quotes from Toll the Hounds, this is a paraphrase, is they're like, show me like a history textbook that's completely logically consistent, and I will show you a true piece of fiction. Like,
yeah, exactly. So yeah, they're archaeologists too, so I think they enjoy giving historians a hard time, because you think of the historians, there are quite a few in the Malazan series, and they're either the dry kind of pretentious ones who appear in the epigraphs who think they know what's going on and clearly don't, or they're the disillusioned ones like Duiker, who's like, yeah, I mean, what we're doing here is just a load of nonsense, because we can't really capture what happens on the chain of dogs in a history, right? I mean, it can't serve that purpose.
This is kind of why Guy Gavriel Kay changes names to stuff, because
yeah,
he doesn't want to commit to like, this is what I think happened. He said in that essay where he explains this, really good essay, his agent was like, if you just write a historical fiction and like, we'll get you a really like big deal for this. Like, and he's like, I'm doing fine. I don't think I will.
Good for him. Yeah. There's some honesty in that. I like that, Yeah. Cool.
Oh, yeah. There was one book I wanted to ask if you'd read, because I read it this year and it seemed like the type of thing you would. Have you read The Last Unicorn by Peter Beagle?
By Peter Beagle?
Yes.
Yeah. I actually have not read that. No.
Okay. I was curious about that.
But did you like it?
Oh yeah. I thought it was really good. It was the reason is it felt like, this is what I think about as good of a praise as I can give a standalone book. It felt like a book that you could both teach in a class or you could read to children in a library who are 10, and it would be work for both of those things.
Cool.
Kind of like the Hobbit or Lord of the Rings. Like Lord of the Rings can be taught in a class, obviously, or it can be enjoyed by someone who's 13.
Yep.
I think The Last Unicorn gave that vibe. It's really short, but I was just curious if you'd read that one.
Yeah, I haven't read it. It's another gap in my reading.
Everyone
has many. Yeah, but I would like to read it someday. Yeah.
There are more books than there is time. I remember I was worried I wouldn't have any new books to read after I went through like the ones he had in his S tier, and it's like, oh no, there are so many.
I don't think you're ever gonna have that problem.
I don't think so either.
I know I won't.
No matter how many books I read, because I read pretty fast, but I find books I want to read even faster.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, like as many books as I knock off the TBR, there's like 3 more that take their place. It's like one of those epic fantasy battles where books are taking the place. They're like orcs, they just like multiply out of nowhere, and you kill one and like 5 more show up, and
they're endless. They're an even more endless army than any like fantasy race that's designed to die, basically. I mean, fodder fantasy races,
that's right.
Trollocs, orcs, where they're just like, they're there so to be Yeah, they have the die, which is somewhat unfortunate.
Yeah, yeah. It would suck to be an orc, I guess. Yeah, but other writers have taken the position of kind of like what John Gardner did with Grendel, right?
That's a hole in my writing. I have not read that.
Okay, yeah, that's a good book. Yeah, based on Beowulf, of course, but from Grendel's perspective, right? So yeah, that's a good one. You'd like that, I think. Yeah.
Now you're trying. I spent the last while trying to add Guy Gavriel Cage. Like, I shall have revenge. Then I was also going to try and push Sun Eater on you, but I think I'll stick with Guy Gavriel Cage.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, he's on my radar too. Christopher Rocchio. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And that's another one that's on my radar. I know that's science fiction, right? But
it's kind of like, it's reads like an epic fantasy that just happens to be set in a giant space empire.
And more like Star Wars than Star Trek.
That would absolutely. So it's just like, instead of having a magic sword, you have a science sword.
So more like Dune and Star Wars. And
it's a lot of, like, I think if a fan of like hard sci-fi read it, they would be pretty disappointed. It's what I recommend. I recommend it more to fans of epic fantasy than sci-fi fans.
Oh, cool.
It really is an epic fantasy. Like, it just happens to be set in space.
Yeah.
Well, not in space, on planets general. Sometimes in space. This is
it sounds like I would enjoy it a lot. And I do like really hard sci-fi as well. There are certain authors like Dan Simmons that I've really enjoyed. The Hyperion books, for example.
Those are great.
Yeah.
Still, I've only read the first two. Those are the only Dan Simmons books. I don't read a huge amount of hard sci-fi.
I don't either, but
I generally enjoy the softer sci-fi. Like, most of my favorite sci-fi books are kind of almost fantasy, like the fantasy, if we're gonna call it that.
Yeah, whatever we call it. Yeah,
really good though.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's been a long time since I read that too, though. Yeah, but nice. So you said, what are you reading now?
I am reading
Cook. Yeah,
Bleak Seasons by Glenn Cook, which has been, it's the most Ericksonian Black Company book. So
you got to use the word Ericksonian.
I like that word. Yeah, I'm going to be using that a lot. If you see complaints in my comment section in the future of I use the word Ericksonian too much, you'll know the origin.
I will be very proud of that, actually. So yeah.
That will be an impact. You'll have a ripple that your influence can have on the world that you didn't know was coming. You just used it,
You never know how you're going to touch lives when you're on BookTube. So
exactly. Speaking
of which, I was curious too, when we were talking about your literary journey and all of that, we were talking about, I don't know if we got finished with that even. I feel like we got close to finishing, but maybe.
We got to about 2020.
Okay.
Because after 2020, I went through a lot of series, some of which I really liked, some of which I thought were fine. So I was like First Law, Abercrombie, Abercrombie.
Yeah.
A bunch of others, Lies of Locke Lamora.
I like that too.
And then I read The Burning, Rage of Dragons, which I enjoy quite a lot. And then eventually I read, about a year after, because I was trying to catch up to every series, because my plan, which I did do, was after Rhythm of War came out, I would read Rhythm of War, and I would have basically nothing on ongoing series. And then I would start Malazan Book of the Fallen, and like an absolute mad person, I read basically all 10 of them back to back.
Yikes. Yeah, you're
crazy.
Because
I was just like, sometimes when I do things like this, people think I read ridiculously fast. I find I do not seem to it's much harder for me to get burnt out on an author than other people seem to get to. Like, I just I know book burnout, like author burnout is a thing, but not really, because it happens to me just because like I see it happen to other people. And also I was just like, I'm going to forget everything if I take big breaks in between these. So the only break I took was accidental, and it's because the copy of Toll the Hounds I had was like bound improperly and the pages were falling out. So I had to go get it. So I quickly read like a novella, and I called all the bookstores around the area to try and find it, and drove like an hour and got it. And then the race continued.
So is there anyone that you haven't yet read that you're really eager to get to?
How long do you have?
Okay.
Okay. So these are the series that are coming up for me next. One of which is the Long Price Quartet.
Oh, great. Daniel Abraham.
Yeah, Daniel Abraham. I also, once I finish The Black Company, my next like big series I'm going to do is going to be The Expanse, which I'm not going to binge. I'm going to read somewhat slowly. So it's going to be a Daniel Abraham-a-thon. I also want to read Curse of the Challeon, like Bujold.
Yeah, Lois McMaster's Bujold. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about her writing. I've heard I've both heard people go, yeah, I see her all the time on the like when people finish Realm of the Elderlings and they're like, what's kind of similar? And then people are like, oh, you can try Curse of the Challeon. And then other people be like, it's actually not that similar. The similarities are overblown, but it's really good. So read it anyways. I'm just like, okay, that sounds good. And I'm going to do a Ken Liu, Dandelion Dynasty. I'm going to do read along, first channel read along starting in September.
That's gotten some people excited lately, like Jimmy, for example.
Yeah, Jimmy
and
loved
Patrick. Yeah.
It was kind of the series. If you'd asked me in December of last year, what do you think of the Dandelion Dynasty? I would have said, what's the Dandelion Dynasty? And then, you know, when you've never heard of a series and then suddenly you see it everywhere, that's what happened with the Dandelion Dynasty. And it sounds right up my alley. There's someone on Mike's Discord who's like a huge fan of Hobb, Guy Gavriel Kay, and Christopher Rocchio. And he's just like, this is kind of giving off Guy Gavriel Kay vibes.
Wow.
You should read. And he has very similar taste in me for like the more elegant prose books, like all the books that have like more lyrical prose. We tend to agree on those. And he's like, this is really good. I think you'll really like this. And then there's someone else on Allure who I think I call him a hipster like Alan, because it seems like he'll be interested in a book. Like he was interested in Tigana. And then I really liked Tigana and I started really liking Guy Gavriel Kay. And now it's like, it feels like he's no longer interested in Guy Gavriel Kay. So I call him a hipster. So I'm like, all right, I want to do a read along. So you join it, because if I read this series and really like it, then you're not going to read it for 5 years. So there we go. That's why we're doing a read along. Also, nice. Kyle, again, sent me the first book of the Dandelion Dynasty. So I feel like I want to give him most bang for buck, because when he went to do the shipping, thinking, oh, it's Canada to Canada shipping, and then he'd already given it to him in the box, and then the person at the post office said the price for the shipping, and it was cost more than the book, and then goodness. Only social pressure got him. He didn't want to be like, oh, then never mind. So he sent it to me anyways, and I was like, oh, you shouldn't have done that, but thank you.
So he paid more than the price of the book to send
it. Yes.
From somewhere in Canada to somewhere in Canada.
Correct. Which, granted, Canada is a big country, but
it's
still.
Big. Yeah.
But you don't have to cross any borders. Like, it's just a dude is going to drive, whatever. So I feel like I need to give him his money's worth. So I decided to start a read along. And also I wanted to try doing a read along, depending how it goes. It's like, oh, there's 4 books. I want to get to Book of the New Sun next year.
Gene Wolfe. I got to do that too. We might be reading the same time even. Who knows?
Yeah, I might 2023. Although I don't know how Book of the New Sun read along would go, because apparently it's pretty challenging.
That's what I hear. Yeah, I hear it's kind of dense, but I'm looking forward to it. I'll probably do R. Scott Baker first. That's what I'm hoping to actually start The Darkness That Comes Before this summer.
It's another one that's on the list for me.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I've driven all the way across Canada.
It probably took a while.
Trans-Canadian Highway. It took 3.5 days actually. So I'm from Vermont, which is just south of Quebec. So I went up into Quebec and then all the way over on the Trans-Canadian Highway, all the way to, where did I come down? In BC.
And you didn't even say hi to me? Wow.
You weren't alive then.
That's a pretty good excuse. As excuses go.
This was in 1990. So yeah, you weren't even thought of.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie. As excuses go, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
But still
I think it's a pretty good one. I mean, it's an oversight, but you know, we'll go with that excuse anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's a vast country and beautiful. And I'm 1/4 Canadian myself, so I feel like I'm sort of also kind of.
That means you can write a bit like Stephen Harrison and Guy Gavriel Kay, right? Speaking of which, you have your series, which I know is making progress towards being available. I'm pretty excited for that. That's an author I'm excited to get to. I haven't got to. Philip Chase.
Oh my goodness.
I haven't read his writing, but I think he has an excellent understanding of what makes good storytelling. And I think he has a good understanding of human nature and writing techniques. So I'm very excited to get to his books. I haven't heard much about them. but they're supposed to be quite polished, and
Yeah.
I think it's going to be really good. I heard you read those. What did you think of them?
I have read them coincidentally,
Are
and
they your most reread books? I've heard. Have you read that more or Tolkien more?
it's pretty close between the two, but I think I have to go with Philip Chase on that. And I will give you a full-throated endorsement. They're absolutely like the greatest thing since sliced bread. You probably should buy copies, not only for yourself, but for all your friends and loved ones for their birthdays and Christmas.
Okay. Is there going to be any special editions so I can get them all like Subterranean Press editions or something?
Oh, oh my goodness. I mean, if I'm going to dream, I might as well dream big. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to get somebody famous like Andy Serkis, or what's the guy, Stephen Pacey, who reads the First Law books? Yeah.
I can't, my brain doesn't do audiobooks well.
I don't either, but I'll have somebody famous and cool do the audiobooks, and I'll have a Subterranean Press edition with all kinds of brilliant artists contributing to that. And yeah, well, we can dream big anyway. So, but yeah, no, it's my agent submitted the books to various publishers a little over 2 weeks ago. And so I'm just waiting and trying not to think about it really, because apparently that's a process that can take a long time. I've heard months even. So
my sister's my sister is trying to be a professional writer.
Cool.
We both got the reading gene. She got all the writing genes in the family. Huh. She writes much more like contemporary though. She struggles with, she's writing like a fantasy book for fun. Like as her side project, because basically she thought she was going to be at one point like a fantasy author, but then she realized that she hates world building. That's not true. She likes world building. She hates that it has to be consistent. So she's just
you should be like Erickson and Nesselman and just,
it's pretty consistent. I mean, there are some times where, he'll say sometimes it isn't completely consistent, but that's just because of how big it is. Like it's still, it's pretty consistent.
Yeah. It is.
But she I think is in the same stage as you. She's got her agent and is trying to send it to publishers. So
wow.
I think she got an agent, and then the agent told her, like, gave her a final edit. And so she's, I think, going through the final edit.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's a good agent then. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Wow. Well, I wish her the best. And are you going to review her books on your channel?
Probably not. I mentioned it in a wrap up because I've read it already. I read, I think, draft 6 or something, and it's on like draft 10. So I've read it and it was good. Like, it's not my genre, but I mean, she's a good writer. Like, she'll get published.
Wow. That's awesome.
So yeah, we'll see. Race to get published between my sister and you. Winner gets nothing. They get a published book. So that's something.
Winner hopefully gets to be reviewed on your channel, maybe. But
I'll probably review your book on my channel, so I probably won't review my sister's, but I know some people I think are worried that like they have this for like the reviewer space, that like if the author's watching it, but like I think book's probably good, but I don't think, if I give your book 4 stars, you're gonna be like, I won't be friends with Jake anymore. Like, no, it's like, come on, people. Like, authors are adults. They can handle if you don't give every book they have 5 stars. They'll be fine.
This is true. Yeah. I mean, I really do feel like I'm probably gonna have some people read it who love it, and I'm gonna have some people who are friends with me on this platform who are like, I'm sorry, this is not for me.
Yeah, it's gonna happen.
So, that's gonna happen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, but I don't know. I have no experience on having book via, but I feel like it's obviously like, it's kind of, Brandon said at one point Words of Radiance was the highest rated book on Goodreads, and the 1-star reviews, he was still like, that kind of hurts, while having the highest rated book on Goodreads. But wow, it's also like, you just have to, I think, it's the same thing with like, Rockio I talk to on Discord sometimes, or like Grindley Durfee, like they're not gonna, you're all adults. You're not going to be like a child if someone doesn't like their books. Like, it'll be fine. Yeah. It's not going to, it wouldn't mean we're enemies.
There's nobody in the world who is going to write a book that everybody else is going to love universally. Yes. There's no way,
Yeah, it's not that no one is that skilled. It's that combination of words doesn't exist. Right? Like the combination of words that nobody hates, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like someone out there will hate something about it.
So you said your sister got all the writing genes. Are you sure you're not going to try your hand?
So I am not going to make a claim for future me. Maybe at the age of 40, I'll be like, I'm going to try writing a book. Who knows? But I am not currently working on a book. And the large reason is just I would rather read. And I feel like it takes up the same time. Like it's the same time in my life. And it's like, I can either read people who I think are better at it than me, or I can try and do it. Although one book who wrote something that's way harder on himself than I am on it is Jimmy with his novella, and he keeps crapping on it. And I'm like, it was a fun novella. Like
I've read Jimmy's writing, and he's got so much good stuff to build on. And the guy, he's got such a great work ethic. I think that he's somebody I could see becoming a great writer if he wants to pursue that. Yeah.
I think in his head, the problem is he'll compare his first draft of his debut novella to like The Crippled God. And it's like, okay, obviously, so you're not going to write The Crippled God.
Right.
But like,
I'm not going to write The Crippled God.
Even debut Erickson wasn't going to write The Crippled God. Like that writing The Crippled God took decades of experience and being a genius.
Yeah.
So it's like,
that's an accurate statement. Yeah.
But also, like, if I compare that novella to debut novels of some authors I really like compare it to Elantris, Stormfront. And I mean, those aren't even the first books they wrote. Those are the first books they got published.
Yeah.
Like it's probably better than a lot of really, really successful writers' first books. I mean, I'm pretty sure. I mean, every author kind of says like their first, although not every author, because some people publish their first book. And some people like you work on them for 20 years, or how long have you worked on it?
18 years.
18. So
but not consistently through, it's more or less 18 summers, I should say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it would be like, I think if we had the comparison, because most authors are just like, you don't want to read those first books. My guess is if I were to ask you, hey, how were those books a year and a half into working on them? You'd be like if we found that manuscript and I was like, I'll give that a read, you'd probably be like, no, don't do that.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I would not want anyone to read my first draft. It's
kind of like that for videos, except you kind of you were going to ask how I got to BookTube. There's a story for that.
Well, let's hear the story.
The story is, I was kind of thinking about it, but then I kept seeing these videos that I thought were really, really good. And I was like, but mine are going to they're going to suck. And so Alex Nieves, he was like, tell you what, go watch my first video. I watched it and very enthusiastic. I was like, wow, that was terrible.
Alex.
Alex was like, see what I mean? And I was like, I can make a video that terrible. So I just made the first video and it was terrible.
That's so funny.
It was
Alex is great. Alex is a great guy. I promise you that his first video is not more awkward than mine. So yeah.
I feel like I might. What was your first? It was one of the why this is the best of fantasy.
Yeah, well, that's how I started with this whole best of fantasy thing. And
welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. But my very first video was a kind of what goes into the best fantasy thing, and I have like a jump cut every 3 seconds, and even then, my delivery is like I'm kind of like totally dead, so it's just very boring. And although I still kind of like what I had to say, I've changed my mind on a few things a little bit, I've shifted a little, but I still kind of like what I had to say, just the delivery is just so awful. So yeah,
my first video is bad, don't watch it, it's not worth your time.
I keep it there as a badge of honor,
I don't want to delete them.
This is where I came from, people, and here's hopefully I'm better now.
I've changed the names on all of them, because what I don't want to happen is I don't want someone to find that and be like their first video and be like, oh, I'm not going to watch the rest. So I've changed, especially the sound quality. It's really bad.
Oh yeah, mine too is horrible.
It's literally just using the audio of the webcam. It's painful. Technically I could show you how bad it is, but I'm not going to put everyone through that.
I'm going to
just change my microphone. I mean, if you want, I can switch my microphone. Are you guys all ready? This is what video 1 from me sounded like.
Okay.
So it sounded like this.
Oh, you sound like you're you sound like you're in a water tank.
Yeah, it was bad. So I've now changed like my first 10 videos or something to their title. I've added bad sound quality. So people that know this is not normal. If you watch my normal videos, it's not going to be that bad.
Yeah, the sound quality was one of the hardest things for me to figure out. And I'm still not really I have never invested in a really nice mic or something like that. So some people probably still think it's not very good, but it's better than it was.
I don't notice it as not as being not good, but I don't know if I'm not exactly a sound quality expert. I was just like, I got the completely the basic YouTuber mic everyone has, me Blue Yeti.
I don't even have that. So
I put it here and I talk into it.
Yeah, it works. It works. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jake, this has been a ton of fun. And I am so happy that I finally got a chance to sit down with you and talk fantasy, talk reading, talk writing, talk all this good stuff. It's been a really fun conversation for me. And I'm sure that my viewers are going to agree. And I hope that we'll have a chance to talk about some of these series. Maybe when I finally do read some GGK, you and I are going to have to sit down and have a discussion.
I would be very happy to do that. And you know what? The people who you said you're sure the people enjoy this, the people who haven't enjoyed it, they're probably not here anymore because they probably quit. So we can just make fun of them. Ha ha ha. You guys should have enjoyed it. It was good.
Hi.
But for the people who are here and therefore cool. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much, everybody. And till next time.